Good morning, fellow writers. It is Saturday, October 1st, and I am freaking out over here because it is officially Preptober time, and I've been so ready. I've been literally over here, like, trying not to be, like, squealing and screeching and stuff because my kids will pick that up, and they already do enough of that as it is. But oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So, if you don't know what NaNoWriMo is, it's National Novel Writing Month, the month of November. A bunch of writers make a commitment to try and write 50,000 words on a novel in that 1 month. And Preptober is the month of October, which is where a lot of us try to plan out the month, plan out our own schedules and our own things, but also the novels themselves, so we have a better chance of actually completing the 50K, and for some of us, maybe even going past it if we need to hit a higher word count goal by the end of the month. So I today, for my Preptober day one, am downloading and printing 2 Preptober workbooks. I know it's overkill, but I'm actually seriously considering doing 2 separate projects, planning them this month, and then only working on one of them, obviously, for Nano. But then having the other one available to potentially work on at a later time. But the first will be, I would do a drum roll, but I'm holding my camera. Project Swan, which is my first YA fairy tale. I started it last year, Camp Nano in 2021, in July of 2021. I got quite a ways into Act 1 and then realized at that point that I really wanted to solidify more of the Project Coastlander. That was really where my heart was. And now that I have made significant progress in Project Coastlander to the point where now I'm ready to start outlining, but I'm not really ready to start drafting yet, I was like, you know what? I would love to take Nano as a time to just set aside, pause on the outlining, and allow myself to draft something that I can use later for publishing. And I've been wanting to work on Project Swan. I love my fairy tales. I had to find the right time to work on it, and I think that right now is the right time. So Preptober is going to be me planning out both Project Swan and my high fantasy romance, because I want to keep that on the back burner as well. I'm going to go print off these workbooks, and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start working on this. And I got to figure out how I want to plan out both of them. Since the 2 workbooks are very different. Like, the one workbook that I have is from Heart Breathings. Sarah Cannon does an amazing job, and it's free. So much of her content is free, and yet she offers even more in her paid classes. I'm so looking forward to the day when I can afford to do that. But hers is more for the author yourself to, do things like figuring out your space, figuring out your schedule, figuring out what's in your own head as far as what you want to accomplish goals-wise, figuring out your calendar, even doing menu planning, which for me is huge because I cook for a family of 5, and I'm on a special diet, but my family's not, and it's like all the things. So that's going to be huge for me. And then the second Preptober workbook is from Natalia, Leigh, who's an author here on AuthorTube as well, who does a workbook every year. And hers has that in it, but it's really focused on figuring out your story, which I feel like I would need more for the high fantasy, or not the high fantasy. Yeah, well, it's high fantasy romance. I may actually honestly print off certain pages from the one for both. I don't know. I'll figure it out and I'll let you know. But for now, I'm going to print off those 2 and just figure out what I want to work on first. Are you ready? Let's breathe through this and let's get going. Okay, I got it all printed, and I'm sitting in my girls' room right now, which is why the stuffed animals and the Anna and Elsa blankets. But I got so much stuff printed, it's actually kind of scary. But I am now trying to figure out exactly how I want to do this. So I did not print all of the pages from both workbooks. Both are set up so that you could order it through like maybe Staples or Office Max or somewhere and have it printed and bound for you, so you have like extra pages that you might not necessarily need otherwise. There were also some pages that were like explanations of things that I didn't necessarily need. But I did still end up, for some of these story related pages, I would print duplicates so that I would have some for both stories, the fairy tales as well as the fantasy, as well as, there you go, the fairy tales as well as the romance. And then I also included, can you hear my daughter in there? I love my life so much. I love the crazy chaoticness of it. Okay. So I did get both workbooks. Let me see if I can get them up here. Ha, there we go. Both of these have similar pages for a lot of things like calendar and a couple of different trackers. But I was right. This one is actually technically a Preptober planner. The one from Heart Breathings, which, by the way, I'm going to link description boxes for both of their sites. You have to sign up for this one through Sarah Cannon's newsletter, and you can get this one from Natalia's site. I got mine for, I think it's like a donation-based setup, and I got mine for $5. I just put in, it was already in for $5. I was like, $5 sounds good. I'm sure she put in enough work for this. She deserves even more, but $5 is good for now. So this is a planner, and so it has a lot more of like checklists, and it has several calendars and trackers, and it has, oh my gosh, she did an entire, her calendar has menu plans for every single day of the week of the month, as well as a schedule for every day. That is, she has a weekly calendar built in. That is why I got hers, because again, because as I mentioned before, I am the bread maker of the family. And so, you know, self-appointed bread maker, but I am the one who makes the meals and things. And so Sarah, if you ever see this video, thank you from the bottom of my heart. But she has a lot more of the preparing to do the writing, making sure that your writing routine is set up and that you've got your game plan and your space and all of the numbers. And she even, I didn't print this out because I already know kind of what I write as far as how many words per minute, or not words per minute, but like words per sprint I usually average. But she has a way to figure that out so that you can figure out how many sprints a day you'll need for how many days of the month in order to hit your goals and everything. You really need to check this out if you have not yet figured out those kinds of things. And then Natalia's is definitely more story structured or story focused, like I said. Like if you look at the table of contents that she has a lot of the calendars and trackers, but a ton of it is narrowing down ideas for stories, moods, playlists, aesthetics, characters, villains, visuals for all of these things, settings, point of view, outlining, potential titles. Like, this is what I'm going to start with. Sarah has a, see if I can find it. Sarah does have in here a page all about just your story, just figuring out the basics of your story. Yeah, right here. But that is really the only story-related page that she has, and it's because she has a million other free workbooks with all this material. Again, sign up for her newsletter if you're not. Like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. So I printed off duplicates for her page, and I think I'll pull those out, and I'll go ahead and use those. I think what I will do for the filling out of the workbooks, start with Natalia's, go through the story-based stuff. I did print off, as well as these, the manuscript that I had. So I think it was only like the first couple of chapters, but I had the first bit of it already written. So I'm gonna, so I won't probably rewrite this, but I'll go ahead and print this off, and I will read back through it, and I will pull out my series binder for the fairy tales, and I will find all the information that I already had written down, and just really solidify it in this, as well as filling out the informational pages for my fantasy romance series, which I need to get a binder for because for the fantasy romance, all that I had was a very old school folder that I had saved because it was colorful, and it has masking tape on the side. That's how falling apart that is, and how pathetic it is. So I'm gonna get a new binder. I may be able to get that today because I am going to be going shopping later. But I'll start with this, and with these pages here, I'm gonna work through the story, and I think I will do a separate video going through all of the delicious trackers and setting up a schedule, setting up planning. In fact, I may combine this with the pages in here that are for trackers and stuff like that. So story today, tracking and schedules for another time. I'm excited. I'm done talking. Let's go write. morning, it is now several days later, almost a full week later, and I know I look terrible. It's been a long week, but I have been working on the workbooks ever since I recorded last. I just haven't been able to film. One of the challenges of being a mommy author with my kids staying at home with me all day and trying to homeschool them and all that, plus still getting over being sick, is that I'm not always able to film what I'm doing because I just have to sit down in the time that I have and just do it. So I used to do it more and I was better at filming it. I just need to get back in the habit. Hopefully Preptober and NaNoWriMo will help me to get back into that habit so I can keep sharing these vlogs with you guys. But I have been working on them and things have gone really well. Saturday was mostly just like organizing, like splitting up the pages, organizing the new notebooks, looking at what I already had for Project Swan, and then also looking at what I had for the fantasy romance, which is honestly hilarious. I should show you guys in a little while what I had. It's sad. But I organized, and it wasn't really, I think, until Tuesday that I had a really good like breakthrough, like sat down and just wrote a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm mostly done with my workbook for Swan Song. Oop, I said the name. So I'm mostly done with my notebook for Project Swan. And I think this afternoon I'm going to really work hard on finishing up the workbook sections for the fantasy romance. And then at the end of it all, I will sit down, we'll look at the workbooks, we'll look at what I've got done, and I will talk to you guys a little bit more about these projects that I'm working on, what they are, and how I'm planning on juggling projects moving forward. And let's start with the fantasy romance binder. I really am glad that I got a thicker binder because I think that by the time I have finished all of the work that I want to do from this and any other books in this series, it's going to be pretty thick. But I went ahead and used Natalia Leigh's Preptober workbook cover for the cover of this binder since I don't have a mock cover. And then if you'll see here, I didn't fill this out yet just because I didn't get around to it. But this is literally all that I had for the story when I was writing it. I had a map and some ideas for some of the cultures that I was drawing inspiration from for world building, and I had this blurb, a summary of the very, very vague summary of the story that I came up with when I was a teenager that has served as the basis for all 4 potential romances in this series. So that was all I had to work with. It was literally a pantsing project. And then I did write out the table of contents just because I wanted to have it available to see in case I wanted to go back and print off any additional pages. I did fill out the basics of a good book. You'll notice there are 2 Jane Austen stories in here. Those are the stories I think that inspire my romantic side the most. And then this was mostly for the fairy tales, but it did also play over into this. And I'm going to cover this just a little bit so you can't see too much. But the basic idea of this story is, and I wrote the word girl, but she's 24, so I guess since I'm 29, almost 30, it feels like she's a girl, but she's actually a full-grown woman. But a girl raising a widowed king's daughter falls in love with the king, and it is a forbidden love. The laws dictate that, and this does not share it, but that she actually can never marry into royalty, and she's hiding a secret about her heritage that could endanger
both herself and the king who appointed her. And then I'm going to zoom out a little bit, but all of my crazy handwritten, colorful brainstorming ideas, which were all very much in like the what if scenario, and then if this, then this type thing. My main character has some sheets, and I haven't printed off any visuals yet, but I would like to do that later. And the love interest, the main love interest too, is of course the king, got his own spread. And then they had several of these character profile sheets where they thought were great for like, and there's room for a picture, but again, I haven't printed off any pictures because our printer's on the fritz. But I came up with the princesses in here, and then another one of the ally characters, and then one of the minor antagonists, and then eventually there will also be a couple of other minor antagonists. And I want to eventually fill this book with these little easy character profiles of all of the characters who serve a role. And then I did not end up doing setting sheets just because the world building is so not complete that I didn't even know like the names of a lot of the locations. And I just haven't gotten this far yet. So this would be something that if I was working on this as my main project, I would definitely be filling those out, but I'm not there yet. So that is what I have done for this so far, is literally just establishing some of the basics. And I think later this month I will fill out this. I'll take some time to fill out the setting sheets, and I may also take some time to fill out some minor outlining sheets as well. But that is for a whole other topic. The next notebook is my Fairy Tales notebook, and this is no longer the title of the series. I have no idea what the series title will be, but it was originally The Old Tales Reborn. And this book, this book contains a lot of stuff. It has extra character and world building sheets from the workbooks. It has all of my existing stuff that we're going to see in a minute. And then in the very back, it actually has, if I can get to it, the printed off story as well as a bunch of pages from the other fairy tales. So it's not just the one story at this point, it's all of them. But this was a mock cover that I did a long time ago, and this is the actual title of the book, Swan Song. It hasn't officially been announced, but it's the title, and I don't think it's that terrible. And then I did fill out the sheet for this, which I'm going to switch by pretty quickly. But the premise for this is it's a retelling of the stories of the Wild Swans and the Six Swans. One of them is a Grimm Brothers fairy tale. One of them is a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. They're very similar. And so the story is about Princess Eliza. And I don't want to give all of the story away. I can give a little bit of the story away. So the basic premise is a princess flees her evil stepmother to save her brothers from a curse that turned them to swans. She finds herself a refugee in the courts of a foreign land, trying not to get tangled in the web of lies and political tensions while falling for the land's kind-hearted king. But when she is accused of witchcraft and wrongfully imprisoned, will she be able to fulfill her quest? And there's a whole bunch more to it than that, but yeah. And then I did decide to do the mood creating, very much like suspenseful romantic tension, a lot of enchanted vibes. And honestly, again, you got Jane Austen, and you've got a Bronte sister story in there, and then the show Merlin, just because. But I wrote down why all of those stories give me the feel that I want to have, and then I did the basic outline, which again I'm not going to show you. This is where the pages start to overlap with both existing material and new material. I also discovered that my lead villain is actually wrong. So I did fill out one for a villainous character who will still be a lead antagonist, but it's not the lead villain anymore. And then I have my crayon drawn map. Like literally it's crayon. But this is the official map of the world in which all of the fairy tales are going to take place. And then this story takes place between the lands of Belrovia and Thalon. She's from here, he's from here. And then there's the unclaimed lands in between and the sea, and oh, it's going to be beautiful. And then the other fairy tales are going to take place in these other lands around here. And of course, the Troll Country is one of my favorites that I'm looking forward to. I did a setting sheet for 2 of the different locations, for Edenthwaite Castle, which is where she grows up, and then for Thalon, which is the country that she goes to. No visuals yet, but I'm very much looking forward to that part. And then I haven't created aesthetics. Like I created some aesthetics a long time ago, but I didn't end up printing them off, and now I have lost most of them. So I'm going to go back through and then I will check off all of the boxes. I have yet to fill up my writing playlist, but I want to take my time doing that over the whole month of October. Like, find not just songs with lyrics that remind me of the story or the characters, but also even a playlist that follows the events of the story, like different songs from soundtracks largely that remind me of certain events and that I can play while I'm writing certain events. But I do have a list, here on my YouTube channel, I have a playlist full of YouTube mixes that I have found inspiring to just turn on and listen to while I'm writing. So I will include that playlist in the description box if you want to go check that out. And then here in the very back, I have these scene roadmap workbook pages that I got also from Heart Breathings. A lot of my material is from there. But I found she did an entire series on writing impactful scenes and intense scenes. And since writing scenes that end very nicely and neatly in a package and tend to be a little bit too self-contained is one of my biggest problems, I wanted to use these to really push me. And I'll talk a little bit later about my goals for this, but I have this in the back of the notebook as well. And then, of course, I have, you guys may remember if you've been around here a while, this notebook has been with me for like forever. But I'm going to be using this to make notes on the rest of the series. And in fact, I'm planning on doing a spread later today that marks the differences in the stories of the 4 different fairy tales, because I've noticed that I tend to be drawn towards certain story types, certain character types, certain romance tropes, and I want to make sure that I am not repeating the same story over and over again, especially the same external conflicts. And then in the very back, I have, like I said, all of these pages for the other fairy tales that are yet to come, and I actually do have printed off, because it is free domain, I do have printed off the original 2 fairy tales that I'm drawing from. And then again in the very back, I have the printed off version of what I did write, which I will be basing all of this on when I start writing in November. So those are my 2 notebooks filled out at this point in time, but I do have yet to do all the rest, and this is the part that I am going to be doing in the next video. I'm going to be going through, figuring out my to-do list, figuring out my writing schedules, figuring out my calendars and all of the things, and making an official notebook of this, probably in this notebook over here, that I can go to every single day and fill out all of the things and check off all the lists. So the question is now, why am I doing 2 projects when I'm only running 1 for NaNoWriMo? And what is happening with Project Coastlander on the side? So if you're new to the channel, first of all, hi, welcome. I realized I don't think I did that earlier. I write fantasy, if you couldn't tell. But I have an adult high fantasy series currently titled Project Coastlander that is in the works. I spent the large portion of this year and last world building and working on story basics so that I could begin drafting book 1 this year, and I actually did start drafting book 1 this year. I made it about 42,000 words in, realized it was going in the wrong direction, and started over from scratch. And I am still working on that. However, I have come to a couple of different realizations over the last month, and in regards to Project Coastlander especially. The first being that this project is enormous. Project Coastlander is huge. There's a reason why high fantasy epic sagas are known for taking a really long time to be released, even being released, a book every year to 18 months. It's because they're huge. The world that is required to be built for these stories to exist in, the way that you have to weave in the magic system and the world building and the history and the fantasy race quirks and interesting things, and making sure that you're keeping track of the giant host of characters. It's things that I love, that I live for, but it does take a really long time. And originally, if you guys remember, for those of you who have been around for a very long time, back in 2019, I came to this conclusion that, or actually I think it was the end of 2018, that it was going to take me so long to write this series that I wanted to have other books that I could work on in the background that I could be publishing while I was waiting for this book series to finally be ready. That's the reason that I started working on the fairy tales to begin with, was to have something to write and edit and practice my writing craft on and publish while world building and outlining and writing and preparing this giant series to be released.
because I did not want to release the first book of this series and then not have any of the rest of it written and then spend 10 years getting the next book ready. I didn't want to do that, not to myself, not to my audience. So I set aside the fairy tales last July because I realized at that point in time that I needed to be able to solely focus on Coastlander for a while. It didn't have to be forever, but I needed to take some time and so focus on it solely so that I could get through the big bulk of world building that I was kind of hung up on. And I did, and I made it through. I have a massive world history for this place. I have 5, 6, 7 fantasy races that are fully developed. I have a wide variety of cultures that are partially developed. I have a massive fantasy map. I have all this stuff figured out, and I'm beginning to work on the actual series plot in preparation to begin writing that first book again. However, now that book is finished, I am ready. I am just dying to be working on something that I can actually publish now. So, whilst working on Coastlander as my primary project, I wanted to have several background projects that I could do throughout the year so that I would have books to publish every year and have something to write on that I can get immediate results from. I'm an immediate results person. If I can't see the results, it's very hard for me to put in the work on it. So to help keep me inspired and encouraged, I want to have this to write it on the site. Now, 2019, I often cite as my most productive year. It was the year that I wrote 2.5 books. It was the year that I managed to complete multiple projects. It was my most active year on YouTube. It was my most active year on my social media platforms. Part of that is because I had 2 kids and they were both under 5. And now I have 3 and we're doing school. So it's a whole other thing. However, part of that was, I believe, looking back at the last 3 years, that I allowed myself, it wasn't just that I allowed myself to have no boundaries and I was just writing whatever I felt like. I had a plan laid out at the beginning of the year. This month I work on this book. This month I work on this book. This month I work on this book. And I alternated between several big projects that I knew I was excited for and I was ready to start writing on. And at the end of the year I had all this work done. I had made serious progress on stories that I wasn't ready to publish yet. And then I had written and edited and proofread projects that were ready for publishing. Shorter projects, like the fairy tales. So I wanted to try and, in this coming year, emulate that again. Have a similar structure where I pick a month and I say, okay, I'm going to focus on this book for this month. Have the majority of them be for Coastlander, but have several of them for sure be for the fairy tales, and potentially some time during those months set aside for stories like the fantasy romances, or even other projects that I have working on within the universe of the Coastlander stories, so that by the end of the year I have managed to work on, not just work on lots of different things, but that I have a lot of things finished. A lot of things started and a lot of things finished. Particularly Coastlander, but also these other things. I would love it if Swan Song, now that we know the official title, is a book that I could publish next fall, or maybe the year after. I would love it if I could be writing at a rate that I could continue publishing the next few fairy tales very quickly afterward. This fantasy romance is a series that I would like to publish as a serial. Have it be several episodes, each episode being about a novella length. And then at the end of the season, combine them all into an anthology type situation where you have a season of this story. And where each season follows a different couple, all in the same world, all dealing with the same political and magical stuff, but from different parts of the world and from different perspectives and different romantic tropes. That is something that I would love to be able to do. And I cannot do it if I try to work on my projects one at a time. So October's schedule, as far as my goals for the month, are going to look very simple. This week, I'm going to finish brainstorming and laying out the structure for Swan Song and just get it set up to where I know where all the pieces are. I need to make sure that I figure out my villain, because I have decided that that's not the villain that I want as the main villain. I need to make sure that I know my characters inside and out, that I have refreshed my memory of the settings and of the story and of the plot. And then next week I'm going to begin working on the outline, taking the story structure and filling out a scene-by-scene basic outline. Then the final 2 weeks of Preptober, what I would love to do is take the scene roadmaps that you saw in that notebook and start actually writing out fully detailed scene outlines that will allow me to think through these scenes in advance and figure out how they fit into the overall picture, what is going to really drive the scenes forward, so that rather than just ending a scene and closing the book and thinking how nice it was, the reader ends up staying up way too late in the night because they just can't stop reading, because the end of the scene drives them right into the next one. And not just by leaving it on a crazy cliffhanger, but by drawing them through the whole scene into the next. That is all that I have for you, wonderful writer friends, today. Stay tuned. I'm going to be doing a video, I think, next week where I look through the actual planner stuff and set up my writing schedule, practice maybe even my writing routine, and do my meal planning for the entire month of November. I'm a little scared about that one, but also very excited. And then, of course, I'm going to take you guys along with me as I do my outlining, as I try to do for the first time, really, a seam card outline. And then, of course, NaNoWriMo coming up. There will be lots of videos for that, so stay tuned for those. I love you all. I hope you have an amazing rest of the weekend writing, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Bye!